This is Christopher Walken, and you're listening to the Fantasy Football Helpers podcast. Valuable fantasy football advice with some entertainment thrown in. Hey Todd, it wouldn't kill you to play some competitive sports once in a while, would it?
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Helpers podcast. I'm your host, George Banco. Our first new podcast of the 2015 season. Alongside me, or not alongside me, I always say that, but he's not really next to me in physical form. This is Casey Bass via Skype. Casey, what's happening?
George, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to all the listeners out there. It's we're a whole 2 weeks past the fantasy Super Bowl, and the NFL playoffs are still going on right now. So for us fantasy football junkies, it's time to take a look back and to start preparing for next year already.
Yeah, obviously some people doing DraftKings, and we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here real quick. DraftKings, for you guys doing daily fantasy football leagues, be sure to try to click through our site if you possibly can, and they'll kick us a little bit of dough and just help us kind of support the show, keep the lights on here, pay for our server costs, and help pay these broke writers here, because they work hard just like everybody else does at their job, and it's anytime we could make a little bit off of it, that's always good. And most importantly, it doesn't cost you a dime. You can just click through our site, just to support us. If I know you guys sometimes send us emails and stuff, and that's great, but one of the best ways you can support us is just helping us keep the site afloat, and clicking through DraftKings is one way to do it through our site. It's on the bottom right corner of the front page, and we'll also be having links for contests as they come out. So definitely check that out. It's just a good way to support the show. We also have Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. As always, that's the greatest way to keep in touch with us. I'm a Fantasy Expert 1 on Reddit, and I try to comment on as many articles as I possibly can. People on Reddit, you guys are fantastic. Just bringing some great stuff. Just so many interesting links. I want to maybe mention a few of them on this podcast if I can, because there's some just stats that mind-boggle me. Mainly Russell Wilson being the third-ranked fantasy QB and his wide receivers being the 31st ranked in terms of overall position fantasy football points. I just found that mind-boggling. But anyway, so yeah, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, all the good stuff right there. And also, this will be our first podcast that we broadcast on YouTube. So we will also have a YouTube channel, and you guys can check us out here. So we're just hitting you from all different angles. We're just trying to keep you on your toes in case you want to find a different way to get a hold of us and contact us. So we always appreciate the feedback. I'm stressing the housekeeping stuff a lot right now, obviously, but it's the first podcast of the new year, and we've kind of went off and did some new things to further evolve and just get our name out there better. So definitely check all that stuff out if you can. Now, Casey, are you ready to talk and do a brief recap? Well, we'll keep it as brief as we can on the 2015 fantasy football season. 2014, I'm sorry.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Now, we have a lot of guys we want to talk to you about. We're just going to kind of briefly recap what's been going on, what went on with them in 2014, if they were a big surprise, if they were a bust. And then we also will talk, a little bit about their ADP for next season and just kind of what we might expect. I know it's early, but, this is a good indication based on how a lot of these guys finished, especially these younger players in the second half of the season, and kind of what they're going to bring to you next season. Now, we definitely kept track of who played well in the second half, so we want to kind of give you the best second half players of 2014 and maybe give you an indication on what you can do next year in preparing for your draft, and also just talk, because we love talking about fantasy football. We're just going to recap and just gush about how great some of these players were. So we'll talk about all that, and we're going to start off with the running backs. Let's start off with a guy that Casey mentioned earlier, and I was really glad he brought him up because I almost forgot about him, and I know people would have been flaming us if I did. But Broncos running back C.J. Anderson. Casey, what did you take away from C.J. Anderson's performance in 2014?
Well, C.J. Anderson was the third man up for the Broncos, so this is an incredible story. I mean, we started off with Monty Ball. He had a disappointing start to the season. Then Ronnie Hillman was the next man up, and he played incredible. I have nothing bad to say about Ronnie Hillman, but what C.J. Anderson did was a thing of beauty. I mean, think about this. This guy played 8 games. I want you to do the math here. In 8 games, this guy, he had 1,057 total yards and 10 touchdowns in half a season. I mean, what are we looking at here? If this guy had 16 games, I mean, if this guy did this for 16 games, we're talking about the best running back in football. I mean, Denver really started to rely on the run in the second half of the season, and a lot had to do with this man. He does it all. He had 30. He also had 30 catches during that stretch of time.
That's a big thing. That's what I wanted to talk about, because I don't know if a lot of people mention his PPR numbers, but you just said it yourself. I mean, he had 2 games where he caught 8 passes. Now, for a running back, I know it's the Peyton Manning offense, but in the past, Peyton Manning's running backs have not been good receivers for the most part. He's never really had a receiving running back, even going back to the Edgerrin James days. I mean, Edgerrin James, he was a kind of I wouldn't say a plotting running back, but he was shifty. He could get up the field pretty quickly, but he was not a receiving back per se, and neither was Joseph Adai. And then you also had Monty Ball with Denver. I mean, Denver, a plotting running back there that got hurt. Ronnie Hillman kind of did bring them some receiving value as well, but you're right. C.J. Anderson just took it to a whole nother level.
Well, we did see some of this from Noshan last year.
Good point. Yeah.
So on Denver, there are some pass-catching running backs. They like to have the big back and the smaller back. But C.J. Anderson, I mean, he was the complete package. He had, in these 8 games, he had over 96 yards from scrimmage in all but 1 game. So, I mean, it's not like it was top-heavy. It's not like he only did it 1 game. He did have 2 games of 3+ touchdowns. So, I mean,
yes.
He won some weeks by himself, but he was always a big contributor, and he was the best running back in the second half.
Absolutely. And it's crazy to think about, considering he was the 3rd running back on the depth chart in Denver. I mean, part of it is definitely Denver's great offense, I'd say, but also it's just C.J. Anderson is a good player. We talked a lot about him in our team preseason podcast back in August. This team had a lot of depth at the running back position, and sure enough, he ended up being very, very good. So where do you put your stock in C.J. Anderson? Keep in mind, this guy is only 23 years old, so I can't see how you wouldn't consider him to be a RB1 value going into 2015, or are you against that?
I'm all for it. I mean, the thing, Monty Ball, Ronnie Hillman, I mean, they were a little bit inconsistent. Ronnie Hillman had some fumbling problems, and that's something that C.J. Anderson is not having a problem with. This guy is the complete package. There will be another guy in there, because I think Denver would like to split the carries a little bit more and keep their running backs fresh for the season. So, I mean, I know we gave this 16-game pace. Would C.J. Anderson have held up over a 16-game season with all these touches? Who knows? But, I mean, the potential is there for him. I mean, you know what? I said it earlier about Ronnie Hillman. Whoever is getting the touches on this Denver team with Peyton Manning at the helm, they are an RB1, no doubt. It was Ronnie Hillman. Now it's C.J. Anderson going into next year. From what I could imagine, he's a surefire RB1. Probably a first-round pick in redraft leagues.
Pick him up!
All right, really good. Let's switch gears here to our next guy, another running back who was a big surprise. This is Justin Forsett on the Baltimore Ravens. 5th in rushing, 1,266 rushing yards, 5.4 yards per carry on a retooled offensive line. And I really credit the offensive line for Baltimore. They picked up Eugene Monroe in the offseason. They got rid of Michael O'Hare, the blind side. And Eugene Monroe, they basically got him for nothing. And this guy was, like a Pro Bowl caliber tackle. And they got him for really cheap, and he was a big help for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, what did you take away from Justin Forsett?
Yeah, I mean, huge season by that offensive line, like you said. And it's funny, this is another guy that's the 3rd man up, because we had Ray Rice go down with the suspension and get released. Then we had Bernard Pierce get hurt the first week he started playing. And Justin Forsett, he basically started week 1. So, and he never looked back. So, I know we're talking about second-half players. This guy did it all year. He kind of had a little bit different of the first half and second half. In the first half, he racked up all the yards and all the receiving yards. And he was a top 10 running back all year. But in the second half, he had 3 straight games from his 11th game to his 13th game, where he had over 100 yards in each game. He had 4 touchdowns in those 3 games. He followed that one up with another touchdown and 71 rushing yards. So he